I never thought I'd find myself in this situation. My name is Jake, and I was married to Rachel for 5 years. On the surface, we had a typical American love story, college sweethearts who tied the knot and settled into a nice suburban life. We had a small house, a dog named Max, and a couple of tennis rackets in the garage. Life was mostly good, or so I thought. The problems started to surface over time, but I didn't want to see them. Rachel became distant, often glued to her phone. Her laughter no longer meant for me. She was still beautiful, still charming, but the spark seemed to fizzle out as work and life took their toll. I brushed it off as typical marital boredom. Maybe it was a phase. Who knew? Things escalated when she started using the gym as her excuse for late nights. "I'm just trying to stay fit," she said, tossing her hair over her shoulder with that flirty smile I had fallen in love with. But let's be real. Who needs to go to the gym that often, especially with a husband who was more than willing to hit the courts with her? I figured I'd surprise her one evening. I had planned a romantic dinner only to find her not at home. She was supposed to be at the gym, but as I paced in the living room, something felt off. My gut instinct kicked in, and I decided to drive by the gym. She wasn't there. The sinking feeling in my stomach grew heavier. I went to the local tennis courts instead, figuring maybe she had gone for a quick hit with some friends. When I arrived, I spotted a couple of familiar faces, but one stood out. It was Tom, my tennis rival. We had played against each other for years. He was a decent enough guy, but with that cocky smile and a tendency to flirt, he had been a thorn in my side on and off the court. And there they were, Rachel and Tom, laughing together, her hand resting on his shoulder. My heart sank. It felt like a punch to the gut. I parked the car and sat there trying to process what I was seeing. It all clicked into place. The late nights, the sudden change in her behavior. I couldn't believe Rachel would stoop so low, especially with someone like him. My mind raced with thoughts of betrayal and anger. I should have known better. I had trusted her, but the evidence was right before my eyes. When I confronted her that night, I didn't hold back. I stormed into the house to find her casually scrolling on her phone, blissfully unaware. "So, how was your gym session with Tom?" I asked, my tone icy. Her reaction was a mix of shock and denial. "What are you talking about, Jake?" She shot back, feigning innocence. "You know I was at the gym." "Right, and I just happened to see you with Tom at the courts," I replied. The look on her face was a mixture of surprise and guilt. She stammered through excuses that I could see right through, claims that they were just friends, that it was all innocent, that I was being paranoid. But I wasn't paranoid. I was heartbroken. The anger boiled beneath the surface while sadness crept in, threatening to drown me. How could she do this? Did the love we had mean nothing? As the confrontation unraveled, I found myself descending into a whirlwind of emotions, shock giving way to fury, fury turning into despair, and eventually a cold acceptance that this was my reality. I would need to figure out how to move forward. What happened next, though, was something I hadn't planned for. I decided that if Rachel thought she could play me for a fool, then I could play my own game. I had my own plans brewing, something that would not only crush Tom on the court but also serve as a form of sweet revenge. I took a deep breath. This was going to be my turning point. I was done being the hurt husband. I was ready to reclaim my life, and it started now. After that heated confrontation with Rachel, I found myself spiraling into a dark place. The shock of her betrayal was like a heavy weight on my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. I spent the next few days in a haze, alternating between anger and a pain that felt like it was tearing me apart. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, and more importantly, I couldn't think straight. My friends noticed the difference, but I brushed off their concerns with vague excuses about being stressed at work. Then, the idea hit me. If Rachel thought she could betray me and get away with it, I could show her just how wrong she was. I needed a plan, and it had to be brilliant. I remembered how Tom had always bragged about being the better player, always sneering at my skills on the court. It was time to turn that on its head. I would practice relentlessly, train harder than I ever had, and when the time came, I would crush him in front of everyone. It was a Saturday morning when I decided to hit the courts. The sun was shining and the air buzzed with the energy of weekend warriors. I arrived early, determined to put in the hours of practice. I started with drills, focusing on my serve and my backhand, the main weaknesses in my game. With every shot, I imagined Tom's cocky smile fading as I dominated the court. As the weeks passed, my routine became a daily ritual. I found solace in the sweat and effort, pushing my body beyond what I thought possible. I hired a local coach, someone who could help refine my skills for the upcoming tournament. I didn't tell him my reasons for wanting to improve. I just wanted to win. Every time I saw Rachel, she acted as if everything was normal. She'd ask me how my practice was going, and I'd respond with vague answers, not wanting to give anything away. I could see the guilt creeping into her behavior. She was trying to maintain her image of the perfect wife, even as I began crafting my own version of retribution. There was one particular day when I received a text from Tom. It was an invitation to the upcoming local tournament, and the message dripped with sarcasm. "Hope you're ready to get crushed, Jake. It's going to be fun." That was all I needed to ignite the fire within me. I replied with a simple "bring it on." Meanwhile, Rachel seemed oblivious to my transformations. She still went out with friends and her late nights continued, but I was no longer waiting at home, moping. I was out practicing, gaining confidence and fueling my revenge plan. I even started forming a new social circle, friends who didn't know the old Jake, but rather the new, driven version of me. As the tournament day approached, I found myself more focused than ever. I visualized the moment I would step onto that court, imagine every swing of the racket, every point scored against Tom. I wanted to make a statement not just for me but for Rachel too. She needed to see what she was losing. When the day finally arrived, I could feel the anticipation thrumming in my veins. Arriving at the venue, I felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The crowd was small, but the energy was palpable. I spotted Tom warming up on the adjacent court, his trademark smirk plastered across his face. I was determined not to let that get to me. After a grueling first match, I advanced to the finals, and there he was, Tom, waiting for me across the net. As I approached, I could see the confidence radiating from him. He probably thought this was going to be an easy win. Little did he know I had worked hard for this moment. As we began, the tension was thick. The match progressed, and I found my rhythm. With each point I won, I could feel the adrenaline surging, the desire for victory fueling my every move. I was relentless, hitting shots that had become second nature through weeks of practice. The crowd began to take notice. They cheered as I surged ahead, and with every point, Tom's expression shifted from cocky to incredulous. The tables were turning, and I was reveling in it. The sound of the ball hitting the racket was like poetry, and every cheer from the crowd felt like a validation of my journey. As we played, I could see Rachel in the stands looking increasingly worried. I knew she was there, watching me crush her lover. It was the moment I had dreamed of, the moment that made every hour of practice worth it. I was finally taking control of my life, and it felt exhilarating. With the final point in sight, I served the ball with everything I had. The sound of the ball hitting the net was a sweet symphony to my ears. I had done it. I had beaten Tom, and as I raised my arms in victory, I glanced over at Rachel, who looked utterly defeated. The satisfaction coursed through me like a rush of adrenaline. In that moment, I realized that this was just the beginning. I wasn't going to be the victim anymore. I was reclaiming my life, one serve at a time. I felt a surge of triumph as I stood on the court, basking in the glory of my victory over Tom. The cheers from the small crowd echoed in my ears, and I could hardly believe I had done it. I had crushed him, not just in the match but in a way that sent a clear message to Rachel. She had made her choice, and now she had to deal with the consequences. As I walked off the court, the adrenaline still pumping through me, I caught sight of Rachel's face. She was standing at the edge of the crowd, her expression a mixture of astonishment and regret. I had expected her to come rushing over, but instead, she lingered back, uncertainty written all over her face. That's when I realized that I didn't want her to run to me. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal. Tom, on the other hand, was furious. He stormed off the court, muttering under his breath about how I'd gotten lucky. I couldn't help but laugh to myself. Luck had nothing to do with it. I had worked hard, and the satisfaction of beating him was sweeter than any trophy I could win. As the day wore on, I celebrated my victory with my new friends, people who had supported me throughout my training. We grabbed drinks, laughed, and recounted the highlights of the match. I felt exhilarated, alive in a way I hadn't felt in months. I was no longer just Jake, the husband. I was Jake, the athlete, the competitor. But despite my success, Rachel's presence loomed large in my mind. The victory was bittersweet. Even as I reveled in the moment, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that had taken root in my heart. I had beaten Tom, but the real battle was still to come. I knew I had to confront Rachel again. I needed to lay everything on the line and make it clear that I wouldn't tolerate her infidelity any longer. Later that evening, I returned home, still riding the high from the match. Rachel was sitting on the couch, an anxious look on her face. She had been waiting for me, clearly uncomfortable. I could see the way she fidgeted, her eyes darting to the ground. "Nice game," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thanks, but that's not why I'm here," I replied, cutting straight to the point. "We need to talk." She looked up, surprise and fear flashing in her eyes. "About what?" "About you and Tom," I said, crossing my arms. "I want to know how long this has been going on." Rachel opened her mouth, probably to offer some excuse or to deny everything again, but I cut her off. "I saw you two together. I know what's been happening. You can't keep pretending everything is fine." Her expression shifted and I could see the wheels turning in her mind. "Jake, please, it was nothing, just a few flirty texts." "Flirty texts," I interrupted. "You were out with him, Rachel, don't try to downplay it. You betrayed me, you broke my trust." "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, her voice rising slightly. "It was just a phase, I was feeling lost. I thought you didn't care anymore." The words stung. I had been trying to be a good husband, but I had also been oblivious to her needs. "So you thought cheating was the solution?" I shot back. "I was lonely, Jake. You were always busy with work and tennis. It felt like we were just coexisting, not really living." I took a deep breath, trying to temper my anger. "And your solution was to sleep with my rival. You could have talked to me. You could have come to me with your feelings." Tears welled in her eyes, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered the betrayal, the hurt. "You need to understand that this isn't just about you. You've shattered my trust. I can't just forget that." Rachel started to sob, and I felt a mixture of anger and sorrow. It was painful to see her like this, but I couldn't let my emotions cloud my judgment. "What are we doing, Rachel? Is this marriage even worth saving?" "I want to make it work," she pleaded, reaching out to me. "I'll do anything, Jake, please just give me another chance." Part of me wanted to give in, to believe her words, but the other part was still raw from the betrayal. I wasn't sure if I could forgive her, let alone trust her again. "I don't know," I said finally, my voice heavy. "You've hurt me deeply. Trust isn't something that can be rebuilt overnight. Please don't make any rash decisions," she begged, desperation creeping into her tone. I looked away, trying to gather my thoughts. "Maybe I need some time to think. This is too much for me right now." Rachel nodded, and I could see the resignation in her posture. I walked past her and headed to the bedroom, closing the door behind me. I needed space to process everything. My heart was racing, caught between the desire to forgive and the need to protect myself from further pain. As I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a wave of emotions wash over me. I had spent so many years pouring into this relationship, and now it felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I realized I had a choice to make, whether to fight for the marriage or to cut my losses and move on. Either way, I knew I had to take control of my life. In that moment, I resolved to take my time to think carefully about my next steps. I wouldn't let Rachel dictate the terms of our relationship any longer. I had fought for my self-worth on the tennis court, and now I needed to fight for my happiness in life. The path ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. I was no longer going to be the passive husband. I was taking charge, no matter the cost. The following days felt like walking through a fog. I was still riding the high from my victory over Tom, but the emotional turmoil from Rachel's betrayal hung over me like a dark cloud. I needed to make sense of everything, but I also had to confront the reality of my situation. I couldn't just sit back and let things unfold on their own. I had to take charge. I decided to reach out to my closest friend, Brian, someone I could trust to give me the straight talk I needed. Brian had seen me through thick and thin, always there with advice when I was struggling. We met at our usual bar, a cozy spot where we could talk without interruptions. "So, what's going on, man?" he asked as we settled into a booth, the dim lighting casting shadows across the table. "You've seemed off lately." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "It's Rachel. She cheated on me with Tom." Brian's eyes widened in surprise. "No way, that guy you've been competing against. I never liked him. What's your plan?" I took a deep breath, remembering the sting of Rachel's betrayal. "I don't know yet. I crushed him on the court, but I can't figure out what to do about Rachel. She says she wants to make things work, but can I really trust her?" Brian leaned back, considering my words carefully. "Dude, she crossed a line. Cheating isn't just a mistake, it's a choice. You have to think about whether you want to rebuild this relationship or just move on. Do you think she's really remorseful, or is she just scared of losing you?" That was the crux of the matter, wasn't it? I had seen glimpses of guilt from Rachel, but was it genuine? Or was she simply worried about the consequences of her actions? "I don't know, Brian. Part of me wants to believe her, but I can't shake the feeling that she's only sorry because she got caught." "Trust your gut," Brian said. "Take some time for yourself. Don't rush into anything. You've been through a lot. You need to figure out what you want." That was solid advice, and I appreciated it. I spent the next couple of days focusing on myself. I went back to the gym, put in extra hours on the tennis court, and even picked up a new hobby, guitar. It was a way to channel my emotions, a distraction from the chaos in my mind. I felt stronger both physically and mentally, and that was empowering. But I still had to confront Rachel again. I needed to lay everything on the table, so I called her and asked her to meet me at a cafe near our home. As I waited for her to arrive, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. Would this be the moment where we laid the groundwork for reconciliation, or would it be the beginning of the end? When Rachel walked in, she looked nervous. Her eyes darted around the cafe, and she took a deep breath before approaching me. "Hey, Jake," she said quietly, taking a seat across from me. "Hi, Rachel," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral. "We need to talk about what happened." "Okay," she said, shifting in her seat. "I know we need to have this conversation." I leaned forward, searching her face for sincerity. "I need to know why it happened. What were you looking for? What did Tom offer you that I did?" Rachel opened her mouth, hesitating before answering. "I felt neglected, like you weren't paying attention to me. I got caught up in my own head, and Tom was there. It was stupid, and I regret it." "Regret doesn't change the fact that you hurt me," I said, my voice firm. "You chose to betray my trust. I can't just forget about that." "I know, and I'm so sorry," she pleaded, tears pooling in her eyes. "I messed up. I never wanted to hurt you. Can't we move past this? Can we?" I challenged, feeling the weight of her words. "You want to move past it, but trust is fragile. It takes time to rebuild. I need you to understand that this isn't something we can just gloss over. I need to see that you're willing to put in the effort to rebuild that trust." Rachel nodded, her expression earnest. "I am willing, Jake. I'll do whatever it takes. I want to show you that I can change, that you can trust me again." I took a deep breath, contemplating her response. "What does that look like to you?" I asked. "What steps will you take to prove that you're serious about this?" "I'll be transparent with you, no more hiding my phone or going out without letting you know where I am. I'll make sure you're included in my life, and I'll work on being better at communicating my feelings," she said, her voice steady. "Words are one thing, Rachel. Actions speak louder," I reminded her. "I need time to process everything. I can't promise that I'll forgive you right away, but I'm willing to consider it if you're serious." Rachel nodded, relief flooding her features. "Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that you're willing to at least talk about it. I love you, and I want to fight for us." As I left the cafe, I felt a mix of hope and uncertainty. The road to healing wouldn't be easy, but I realized that I had the power to choose my path. I could either let Rachel's betrayal consume me or take control and move forward, whether that meant rebuilding the relationship or finding a new beginning entirely. The journey ahead would be long, and I knew I had to remain vigilant. This was my life, and I was done being the victim. I would fight for my happiness, and whatever the outcome, I would come out stronger on the other side. The next few weeks were a roller coaster ride of emotions. Rachel was trying hard to prove her commitment to our relationship, and I could see her effort in small ways. She was more attentive, made time for us to talk, and even planned a few date nights to rekindle the intimacy we had lost. I appreciated the effort, but a part of me was still wary. Trust was not something that could be repaired overnight, and I was still grappling with the pain of her betrayal. During this time, I continued to focus on my tennis. I had the upcoming league finals in a few weeks, and the drive to compete was stronger than ever. I wanted to prove to myself that I could channel my pain into something productive. I dedicated hours to practice, refining my skills and pushing myself harder than I ever had before. One evening, as I was wrapping up a particularly intense practice session, I spotted Tom across the court, practicing with a couple of friends. I felt my stomach churn. The last time I had seen him, I had been on top of the world, but now I felt a mixture of anger and resentment creeping back in. Part of me wanted to confront him, to let him know that I had moved on and that Rachel was no longer his to toy with. But another part of me just wanted to focus on my game and not let him get into my head. As I walked past him, he caught my eye and shot me a smug smile. "Nice win at the tournament, Jake. Lucky day for you, huh?" He taunted, his arrogance palpable. "Luck got nothing to do with it, Tom. I worked hard for that win," I replied. My voice steady. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing how much he still affected me. "Oh, I know you worked hard," he said with a smirk. "But let's see how you do when it really counts. You're not the only one who's been practicing." I felt the fire ignite in my chest. "Is that a challenge?" I shot back. "Maybe it is. Let's see who the better player really is," he said, his tone dripping with confidence. The encounter fueled my determination. I decided to put my energy into preparing for the finals, turning my anger into motivation. I needed to show Tom that I was not only a worthy opponent, but also someone who had risen from the ashes of betrayal. I took it upon myself to dig deeper, to uncover every flaw in his game, and exploit them to my advantage. As the days counted down to the finals, Rachel continued to put her best foot forward. She was supportive, attending every practice, cheering me on and texting me encouraging messages throughout the day. I could see her trying to reconnect, and part of me wanted to believe that we could recover from everything. But every time I felt like I was moving forward, the shadows of doubt crept back in. On the night before the finals, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind racing with thoughts of the match and my relationship. I felt a knot in my stomach as I considered the implications of the next day. Would I win? What would that mean for me and Rachel? Would it really help me heal, or would it just be another temporary distraction? I finally decided to get out of bed and went for a late-night run. The cool night air felt refreshing against my skin, and with each step I felt myself releasing some of the pent-up anxiety. I needed to clear my head. As I ran, I reflected on everything that had happened. I needed to confront my feelings head-on to decide what I truly wanted. Rachel had made efforts to change, to prove she was willing to fight for us. But was I ready to let go of the pain? Was I willing to forgive her? As I returned home, I found Rachel sitting on the couch, waiting up for me. There was an anxious look on her face, and I could tell she wanted to talk. "I was worried about you," she said softly as I walked in. "I just needed some fresh air," I replied, my tone neutral. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tinged with vulnerability. Taking a deep breath, I nodded. "Yeah, let's talk." We settled onto the couch, and I noticed how she fidgeted with her hands, clearly nervous. "I know things have been hard for us, and I appreciate you giving me a chance," she started. "I just want you to know how much I care about you. I want to make this work." I searched her eyes, looking for sincerity. "I know you're trying, Rachel, but trust doesn't come easy for me right now. I still feel the weight of everything that happened." "I understand, and I'm not asking you to just forget," she said earnestly. "I want to earn your trust back. I'm committed to showing you that I can be the partner you need." As I listened, I could see her genuine desire to make amends. But the hard truth was that the scars of betrayal still ran deep. "I need time, Rachel. I can't rush this process. There's still a part of me that's unsure." "I'm willing to wait," she replied, tears glistening in her eyes. "I love you, Jake. I'll do anything to prove that." That simple declaration hit me hard. I wanted to believe her, but the fear of getting hurt again loomed large. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our unresolved issues hanging in the air. "I have a big match tomorrow," I finally said, breaking the tension. "It's important to me." "I know. I'll be there cheering you on," Rachel promised, a spark of hope in her voice. I nodded, grateful for her support but still grappling with my own emotions. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'll need it." As I finally headed to bed, I felt a mix of uncertainty and determination. The next day could change everything, not just for my standing in the league, but for my relationship with Rachel. I was ready to give it my all, not just on the court but also in my heart. The road to healing would be tough, but I knew I had the strength to face whatever lay ahead. Whatever the outcome, I was on the cusp of a new chapter, one where I would reclaim not just my love for tennis, but my dignity, self-worth, and the future I wanted for myself. The day of the finals had arrived, and I woke with the sun streaming through the curtains. It felt like a new beginning, a chance to set the tone for my future. I dressed in my best tennis gear, ensuring every detail was perfect. As I looked in the mirror, I reminded myself of the work I had put in, the early morning practices, the late-night drills, and the sacrifices I had made. Today was my day to shine. Before heading to the courts, I took a moment to breathe. I needed to ground myself, to focus on my game and not let anything distract me. Rachel had promised to be there, and I hoped that her presence would provide me with the support I needed. When I arrived at the venue, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. Friends, families, and fellow competitors filled the stands, and I felt the energy pulse through me. I spotted Rachel in the crowd, her eyes bright with encouragement. She flashed me a smile, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of hope that we could make this work. As I warmed up, I stayed focused, blocking out the noise around me. Tom was already on the court, warming up with his own team of friends. I could see the confidence radiating off him, but this time it didn't intimidate me. It fueled my determination. I was ready to show him that I wasn't the same Jake he had faced before. I had grown stronger both on and off the court. When the match began, the tension was palpable. Tom and I exchanged polite nods, and the referee called the game to order. As we played, I felt every ounce of my training pay off. Each serve was powerful, each return calculated. The crowd cheered, and I could feel their energy pushing me forward. With every point I won, I could see Tom's confidence begin to wane. I was relentless, not allowing him the luxury of easy shots or moments to breathe. The match unfolded, point by point, game by game, and as we reached the final set, the stakes were high. The match came down to a single point. The score was tied, and I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I took a deep breath, focusing on the sound of my heartbeat, drowning out the noise of the crowd. I served the ball with everything I had, and as it sailed over the net, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Tom made a desperate attempt to return it, but I was ready. I moved swiftly, anticipating every angle, and with one final swing, I sent the ball soaring past him, winning the match. The crowd erupted in cheers, and I stood there for a moment, soaking in the victory. I had done it. As I made my way off the court, I was met with applause and congratulations from friends and spectators. But more importantly, I spotted Rachel in the crowd. Her face lit up with pride and relief, and that was all I needed. I had fought for this victory, and in many ways it felt like a victory for us both. After the match, I found Rachel waiting for me at the edge of the court. She rushed over, throwing her arms around me. "You were amazing. I'm so proud of you. I couldn't have done it without your support," I said, holding her tightly. In that moment, all the doubts and fears seemed to fade away. As we embraced, I realized that this victory marked a turning point for both of us. I had regained my confidence, and perhaps it was time to rebuild our relationship brick by brick. "We need to talk," I said, pulling away slightly to look into her eyes. "About us?" Rachel nodded, her expression serious. "Yes, I agree. I want to make things right. I don't know what the future holds," I began, feeling the weight of the moment. "But I'm willing to try if you are. It's going to take time, and we need to be honest with each other." "I'm ready to be honest, Jake. I want us to work," she replied, sincerity in her voice. As we walked away from the court side by side, I felt a glimmer of hope. We had both made mistakes, but we were also both willing to fight for what was important to us, The journey of rebuilding would not be easy, but I felt empowered to take the steps necessary to heal. In the weeks that followed, we focused on communication. We addressed our feelings openly, setting boundaries and expectations. Rachel continued to show me her commitment, whether it was through small gestures or deep conversations about her past mistakes. I was learning to trust her again, but it wouldn't be a straightforward path. With each passing day, I felt stronger, both as an individual and as a partner. I had reclaimed my passion for tennis, and now I was learning to reclaim my love for Rachel. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience and understanding, but it felt worth it. I had learned valuable lessons through this experience about trust, love, and the importance of fighting for what matters. Life would always have its ups and downs, but I knew I had the strength to face them head-on. Together, we could forge a new beginning. As I looked back on everything that unfolded, I realized that while betrayal had shaken me to my core, it had also sparked a fire within me. I wasn't just a victim of circumstances. I was a survivor, ready to embrace whatever the future held. I had taken control of my life, and now I was ready to build a future that was authentically mine, with Rachel by my side, navigating the journey together.